Are plants conscious? Can they talk to us? Can we communicate with each other? All these questions are going to be answered in today's video. We will start by explaining how plants have consciousness. Then we are going to show the experiments that proved that plants can perceive our thoughts and intentions. And at the end, we are going to show an experiment where they invented electronics to take the electric signals produced from a plant and translate them into audio output. And the most fascinating part of that is that they could now learn a plant a human language.
って言ってごらんなさい。おーはおーはそう、おーね。と、と、と、と、まだ
Let's go with at the beginning. Are plants conscious? To answer that, let's have one of the most famous physicists explain what consciousness is.
Consciousness is the number of feedback loops required to create a model of your position in space with relationship to other organisms and finally in relationship to time.
First thing about being conscious is to be able to create a model of your position in space. We know that plants move in direction of the light. That movement can be slow, but still it is a movement towards light. Also, what plants do is that they have an understanding of the temperature, the weather, and humidity. Also, a single plant is able to detect and recognize about 20 different chemicals and physical parameters. Plants have a sense of gravity. They are very sensitive to gravity and grow according to gravity. There is something that is not so well known, which is that plants are able to grow based on the direction of the sound. Also, plants are able to detect and sense an object or a living organism. For example, Cuscuta plant is a plant that lives by detecting another plant and parasitizing on its roots to get the food. Not only do they recognize another plant, but they are able to know where to go and take the best justice. But that's not everything. Plants have developed various strategies to protect themselves from threats, as exemplified by tomatoes. These resilient plants employ both physical and chemical defenses to ward off attacking insects. Interestingly, tomatoes also release signaling compounds that communicate with nearby tomato plants, prompting them to release their own insect repellent. In the ongoing battle against relentless assailants, some plants have evolved unique adaptations. For instance, certain plants, such as kidney beans, boast tiny hooks that serve as a formidable defense mechanism, capable of piercing the feet of bedbugs and other insects. In some species, specialized structures called trichomes not only act as physical barriers, but also dispense chemical irritants. Stinging nettles, for instance, release a mixture of histamine and toxins upon contact, inducing pain and inflammation. Other plant species like spinach, kiwi fruit, pineapple, fuchsia, and rhubarb employ microscopic needle-shaped crystals known as raphides. These crystals can inflict tiny wounds inside the mouths of animals, creating entry points for toxins that deter herbivores from taking a bite. In addition to these external defenses, certain plants have developed a remarkable internal mechanism. They possess specialized mechanoreceptor cells that detect touch and transmit electrical signals through their leaves. This signal causes the affected leaflet to release charged particles, leading to the withdrawal of water from the cells, causing them to shrivel and the leaflet to close. This folding movement not only serves to repel insects, but also makes the plant less appealing to larger animals. Should these external defenses fail, the plant's immune system comes into play. Unlike animals, plants lack a separate immune system in every cell. Instead, each plant cell has the capacity to detect and defend against invaders. Specialized receptors recognize molecules, signaling the presence of dangerous microbes or insects, triggering a series of defensive responses. To further fortify their defenses, plants thicken their waxy cuticles and strengthen cell walls, preventing pathogens from infiltrating. Guard cells seal leaf pores to limit access, and if a specific section of the plant is under attack, cells in that area may self-destruct to contain the infection. Furthermore, plants produce compounds toxic to microbes and insects, often tailored to combat specific threats. Remarkably, many of the plant molecules that humans have adopted for various purposes, including drugs, medicines, and seasonings, originally evolved as part of plants' immune systems due to their antimicrobial or insecticidal properties. Moreover, plants can communicate about threats within their own structures using hormones, airborne compounds, or even electrical signals, ensuring that the defense is coordinated and effective. So, we know plants can create a model in relationship to the space and other organisms. But what about time? Now, let's delve into the intriguing world of the Venus flytrap. Inside the leaf of this fascinating plant, you'll find three tiny hairs known as trigger hairs. When a fly lands on these hairs, something remarkable happens. Let's explore this phenomenon. I'm going to touch one of the trigger hairs to demonstrate. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. What do we observe? An impressive action potential occurs. However, the flytrap doesn't immediately snap shut. To understand why, we must delve into the behaviors of the Venus flytrap. Firstly, it's essential to note that the Venus flytrap takes a considerable amount of time to reopen its traps, approximately 24 to 48 hours if no fly is trapped inside. This process consumes a significant amount of energy. Secondly, this carnivorous plant doesn't require an abundance of flies to sustain itself throughout the year. It primarily derives its energy from sunlight. It merely seeks to replenish some nutrients in the soil by capturing flies. Lastly, each trap only opens and closes a limited number of times before it withers away. Therefore, it's critical for the Venus flytrap to ensure that there's a meal inside before it snaps shut. But how does it accomplish this? It employs a rather ingenious method, counting the number of seconds between successive touchings of those trigger hairs. The rationale behind this mechanism is that if a fly is present inside the trap, it is likely to trigger the hairs in quick succession. So, when the Venus flytrap experiences the first action potential, it initiates a countdown. 1, 2, and so on. If it reaches 20 seconds without another trigger, the trap will not close. However, if the fly continues to stimulate the hairs within this time frame, the fly trap will swiftly snap shut. What we witness here is the Venus flytrap performing a remarkable computational task. It evaluates whether there's a fly within its grasp before deciding to close. With this, we can now confirm that plants are conscious beings, even though plants do not have brains and neurons like a human or animal. They still are able to process information and act accordingly to the environment surrounding organisms and time. Even though they manage the process of movement in different fashion from us, without muscles. That process is managed with action potentials. Here, electrical charges are sent to the water inside the cells, and when the voltage hits the cell, it opens up, releases the water, and consequently changes the shape of the cells, and the leaf falls. And the opposite happens when the water is sent inside the cell. Now, the proofs that plants are conscious are not the most exciting part of this video. For example, Mrs. Ritalik had a deep affinity for plants and had always been an integral part of her life, much like her connection to music. This led her to theorize that in subtle ways, plants might share her sensitivity to sound. The dissonance of harsh music had long unsettled her, prompting her to wonder if plants, too, had preferences when it came to sound. The experiment she devised to explore this question has been replicated numerous times, almost always yielding remarkable results. Mrs. Ritalik consistently employed 75 different plants in each experiment, including various vegetable and flowering plants such as green beans, squash, Colorado carnations, petunias, and marigolds. This deliberate variety demonstrated that the outcomes were not merely coincidental. Mrs. Ritalik created two distinct environments for her test plants. She ensured that water levels remained constant, as did temperature and lighting conditions. The key difference lay in the type of music played. Semi-classical melodies filled one chamber, while hard rock resounded in the other. In the chamber with soft, melodic music, the plants noticeably leaned toward the speaker, seemingly drawing strength from the harmonious sounds. However, in the chamber resonating with rock music, the plants recoiled and eventually withered away. Time-lapse photography documented the plants' reactions over several days, making the results unmistakably clear. But the fascinating discoveries does not end there. Cleve Baxter held a profound fascination for polygraphs, and later in his life, he established the Baxter School of Lie Detection in San Diego, California. However, the most captivating part of his story unfolds long before that, at a time when he conceived the idea of examining the biorhythms of something other than humans. He embarked on a remarkable journey by connecting his lie detector to a plant. One might anticipate that a plant's pulse would remain relatively steady, devoid of any intriguing fluctuations. Yet, we owe a debt of gratitude to Baxter's inquisitive nature, for he stumbled upon an astonishing discovery that continues to baffle us even today. This revelation occurred when he attached his polygraph to a Dracaena plant and observed that its electrical signals exhibited unexpected vitality, fluctuating in a manner contrary to his expectations. Baxter recorded that approximately 1 minute into the chart reading, the tracing displayed a short-term change in contour akin to a reaction pattern typical of a human who had momentarily experienced the fear of detection. In essence, the plant appeared for a fleeting moment to become aware that it was not alone in the room. Baxter's curiosity led him to explore whether he could elicit a human-like response from the plant by first subjecting it to a threat. His initial attempts involved dipping a leaf into hot coffee and tapping it with a pen, yielding minimal responses. Despite several other endeavors, no significant reactions were observed. As he paced around the room, pondering his next move, a thought struck him. He would use a match to burn one of the leaves. At that moment, the plant was situated approximately 15 feet away from him, and the only new occurrence was the thought itself. Astonishingly, as soon as the image of burning the leaf entered Baxter's mind, the polygraph recording pen swiftly ascended to the top of the chart. No words were spoken, no physical contact was made with the plant, and no matches were lit, just a clear intention to harm the leaf. The plant's recording demonstrated an intense state of agitation, as if gripped by fear. In response, Baxter recorded the following statement.
But then it occurred to me, just about 14 minutes along, what would be the real optimum threat to the well-being of a plant. In fact, the imagery of fire entered my mind, and I not only thought, but I fully intended to burn the very leaf that was being tested with a match. Now, I had no matches in the room at the time, and I don't smoke, and I had to go next door to my secretary's area to get a match. But the interesting thing is that right at the split second that imagery of fire entered my mind, the tracing reflecting the changes in the plant just went right off the top of the page. And the only thing that occurred at that time, no lighting of a match, nothing else, merely the imagery of fire. And I must say that as of 14 minutes along in that initial observation on the morning of February 2nd, 1966, my life just hasn't been the same.
Baxter sought to ensure that the information exchange between his mind and the living organisms was not taking place through known electromagnetic frequencies like microwaves or radio waves. To address this concern, he conducted experiments with subjects placed within Faraday cages to block electrical signals, and later utilized a state-of-the-art shielded room. Remarkably, even under these controlled conditions, he continued to detect responses, firmly establishing that there was no detectable physical connection between the subject and the recorded reactions. Intriguingly, Baxter also delved into the realm of food, discovering that his plants exhibited signs of distress when he was eating. But when he expressed gratitude and blessings before consuming food, significantly reduced the distress in the food and the surrounding field. It seemed as though the food acknowledged its role in nourishing the body and willingly surrendered itself to this purpose. Now for the dessert. Dr. Kenneth Hashimoto, who was a manager director and chief of Fuji Electronics in Japan, yes, he had constructed special instruments which translated the electric output of the plants into modulated sounds, giving voice to a plant. In this video, you are going to see how Mrs. Hashimoto looks forward to actual conversation to the cactus. She is determined to teach the cactus Japanese because she believes that the plant has consciousness.
おーって言ってごらんなさい。おーはおーはそう、おーね。と、と、と、と、まだまだ
With that, we conclude the Today video. I hope that this information expands your consciousness to the environment and how we are connected to plants, realizing that they have life and we can communicate with them.